On the morning of January 27th, 2023, everything started like a normal day for Nicola Bully. She lived in a small village called Ensued in England, and every day, Nicola followed the same routine. She would take her two daughters to school in a nearby village and then take her dog Willow for a walk along the fields near the River Wire. That morning, Nicola had no idea her day would end very differently. Today, we will talk about the mysterious case of Nicola Bully and explore the possible events that led to her disappearance. Nicola was 45 years old. Her family and friends said she was kind and caring. She was easy to talk to and loved helping others. She had moved to Lancashire. What is up with English people and Lord of the Rings? Anyways, many years ago, built a happy life, and she was loved by many. Everything seemed normal that day, and Nicola's husband, Paul, said the girls ate their breakfast and everyone got ready as usual. After dropping her daughters off at school, Nicola parked her car and started her walk with Willow near the river. At 8:59 a.m., Nicola sent a text to her friend to arrange a playdate for their kids. 2 minutes later, at 9:01 a.m., she joined a work call on her phone. Nicola didn't need to talk in the meeting, so her camera and microphone were off. As she walked, Nicola saw other dog walkers she knew and said hello. People in the area often knew each other, as it was a pretty friendly place. The last time anyone saw Nicola was around 9:10 a.m. She was near a bench by the river, then she vanished. About 20 minutes later, another person walking their dog came to the beach. They saw Willow, but Nicola wasn't there. Willow's harness was lying on the ground and Nicola's phone was on the bench, still connected to the work call. The dog walker thought Nicola might be coming back soon, but she never did. Willow stayed close to the bench, looking around. Other people came by and saw the scene. It was fairly strange. People knew this wasn't normal. Someone recognized Willow and then realized that Nicola was officially missing. The area near the river was usually peaceful and safe. It was a place where people often walked their dogs, greeted each other, and allegedly nothing bad ever happened here. But on this day, something very unusual seemed to take place. Nicola Bully had disappeared and nobody knew why. The small quiet village of St. Michael on Wire was about to become part of a big mystery. The people gathered near the bench where Nicola's dog Willow was found and couldn't stop talking about what might have happened. They all believed that Nicola would come back soon. Maybe there had been an emergency at her home or her daughter's school and she had rushed off to take care of it. But something didn't feel right. Nicola would never leave her dog Willow behind. So my advice would be, instead of sitting there talking to each other, start looking around the area, see if you find her. Nicola loved Willow. The dog was like a family member and she was very protective of her. Even with all of their guesses though, nothing seemed to explain why Nicola wasn't there, which is why you should start looking. One person on the bench decided to call the school to see if Nicola had gone there. The receptionist answered and said Nicola hadn't been there as of yet, but then the receptionist did something important. She called Nicola's partner, Paul. Paul got the call from the school and it immediately filled him with worry. He later said, "The receptionist told me, Mr. Ansel, it's a bit strange, but we found Willow and Nicola's phone on a bench near the river. Her dog's harness is on the ground." Paul didn't waste a second and called the police and rushed to the riverside where Willow and the others were, which is, if you suspect somebody is missing, there's this misnomer that you have to wait 48 hours to look for somebody. That is not true at all. You can report somebody missing immediately. In fact, there was one thing that's even if a kid goes missing or something like that, you have to wait 24 hours. Also not true. The second that you assume somebody to be missing, you can call the cops right then and be like, hey, this person's missing, especially under these weird circumstances. We need to put something out, because the biggest issue with not doing that and waiting 48 hours is, let's say somebody grabs somebody, right? They're getting further and further away every minute. So if you can put up a perimeter as far as the distance that they could have traveled within that time frame, you have a good chance of finding somebody who may be up to something that they're not supposed to be. Waiting 48 hours, maybe that was an old way of doing things, back in the 70s, but it's nowadays, no. You assume somebody's missing, you put that out immediately. But when he arrived, Paul was in complete shock. He was hoping to see Nicola there somewhere waiting with Willow, but she wasn't. He took Willow and began searching the fields, calling out Nicola's name. The situation was incredibly concerning. No matter where Nicola could have gone, Willow should have followed her. Whether Nicola had walked out into the fields, the river, or somewhere else entirely, Willow was known to stick by her side. But instead, Willow had stayed at the bench, alone and confused. The last confirmed sighting of Nicola was at 9:10 a.m. Just 8 minutes later, at 9:18, records show that Nicola adjusted the volume on her phone. This was the last time anyone knew for sure that she interacted with this phone. The work meeting she had joined ended at 9:30 a.m., but her phone stayed connected. By 9:33 a.m., a member of the public found the phone on the bench. This created a mysterious 12-minute gap between 9:18 and 9:30 when something must have happened. And legitimately, a lot of people think events have to take a while, but things can happen so fast. like inside of a minute, your life could change completely. Sometime before her disappearance, Nicola had mentioned that walking in the area sometimes gave her a spooky feeling. It's not clear if this was just a passing thought or if it meant something deeper. Many people believe trusting in your gut feeling and the little warnings your instincts give you, but whatever Nicola had felt in the past, it didn't stop her from coming back to that same spot that morning. So actually, I'm gonna break in once again because, I'm horrible at doing this. So the biggest thing with your gut instinct, as people call it, and a lot of people are like, oh, I'm gonna ignore my gut instinct because, maybe it's wrong. You have things in your brain called mirror neurons, and mirror neurons are actually running all the time, and they're looking for minute patterns, either in the environment or on people's faces, to determine if there's danger. So a lot of it pretty much comes from the fact that, let's say you are in the savannah and you're looking around and you don't happen to see that lion over there, but your brain detects the lion. The mirror neurons are looking for specific things that you may not consciously see, but you are subconsciously seeing. So this is what typically your gut instinct is. It's actually, you've seen something, you just don't know that you've seen it. So it'll kind of give you that uneasy feeling. So typically if, let's say she was feeling uncomfortable in this area, it may be that she actually saw a person lingering or kind of hiding behind something and she just caught a glimpse, but it was in her peripheral vision, so she didn't actually see him in the central vision, so she didn't consciously note that he was there or she was there or anybody was there. It doesn't matter, whoever may have been there or even an animal that was there. The biggest thing is that is what your gut instinct is based on. And this is why when you meet somebody, it's basically minute expressions in the face, micro expressions they call them, that kind of set you on edge. And that's the important part about all of this. You have to trust that gut instinct because it's something your brain is trying to tell you. And there's a whole thing about mirror neurons possibly being, and bear with me on this, the concept is that it may be a form of telepathy that's developing within humans based on a social, structure of like understanding what another person may be thinking, because mirror neurons are supposed to be associated with, you remember in Ghostbusters when there was like they were doing that card thing and you had to guess what the card was. That's actually, they see more activation in mirror neurons than they do in just the prefrontal cortex and people who can't guess what the card is. Those that can guess what the card is, it is a mirror neuron that is being activated. It's very interesting. I talk a lot about that on Roanoke Gaming on my main channel. This is just a side channel, but I just want to get into that real quick. Always trust your gut instinct. My girlfriend's got a saying, trust but verify. That's the key. Trust your gut instinct and verify if you are correct or not. Because I've been put off by people, maybe because there's just a issue with like their face looked weird to me for a second and the mirror neurons are like, I don't know about this one. So it's important that you pay attention to those feelings because they could save your life, because that's why they developed in the first place. The reason those exist is because in the past, somebody trusted those and they may have left a situation or got away from the lion because they're like, ooh, God, I don't want to be here right now. And then they went on to reproduce and then those got passed along. Whereas a person who didn't trust those feelings or didn't have those in the first place, they got eaten. So that's why it's important to trust those. Don't let anybody tell you not to trust your gut instinct. So by 11:27 a.m., a police officer met with Paul. They talked about what happened, and the officer quickly launched a huge search operation. See, they do that immediately. Don't wait 48 hours. The search team then brought in drones to scan the area from above. Professional divers searched the river using sonar equipment to check every corner of the river. Fire and rescue teams, as well as mountain rescue experts, came to help, combing through the fields, paths, and woods. Paul was in an awful position. All he wanted to do was search for Nicola himself, but he also needed to stay home in case she returned. And worse still, the thought he had to tell his daughters about the fact that their mom was missing. And I mean, he has to take care of his kids, so he can't just be running around out there the entire time. As the hours continued to pass, Paul's worry would turn into fear. When his daughters came home from school, they asked him, "Where's mom?" Paul didn't have an answer. Nicola's disappearance was completely out of character for her. Paul later said, "People don't just vanish into thin air. Something had to happen that day." For days, Paul held on to hope, believing she might return and explain everything. But as time went on, it became clear that something had gone terribly wrong. 3 days after Nicola went missing, the news spread across the UK. The public was stunned. How could a woman walking her dog in broad daylight, having just seen people, just disappear? The story captured the nation's attention like no other. It wasn't just another brief mention on the news. This case became a massive topic of discussion, with people across the country offering support and even joining the search efforts. In St. Michael's on Wire, locals believed Nicola had to be somewhere nearby. The tight-knit community banded together, searching fields, rivers, and woods. Volunteers from across the UK traveled to the area to help, but there were no leads, nothing to explain what had happened. As the days passed, three main theories began to emerge about Nicola's disappearance. An accident by the river was definitely one of the large ones. One possibility was that Nicola had just fallen into the river. Some believe she might have gone onto the water's edge to check on something, perhaps turning up the volume on her phone because of a loud noise, or maybe so she could hear it from further away. However, this theory puzzled many people. Willow, her dog, was completely dry, so it didn't seem like the dog had fallen in or jumped in to help. If Nicola had slipped into the water, why didn't Willow follow her along the riverbank or even act distressed? Search teams scoured the river and its banks, but there were no footprints, no sign of a fall, and nothing to suggest she had slipped into the water near the bench. The other one was possibly this could have been a purposeful act. This theory states that Nicola's disappearance was actually intentional, but this didn't seem to fit with what people knew about her. Just before she vanished, Nicola had been texting her friend making plans for their kids to have a play date. If this was intentional, why had she left her phone behind on the bench? Why was Willow still there waiting? The idea of Nicola leaving on her own was quickly dismissed. CCTV cameras covered the area's exits, and she hadn't been spotted leaving, which means she was in there still, or she was probably still there. It was as if she had disappeared without a trace. The next one is also, like, all these are really a possibility, but this one was a third-party involvement. The most unsettling theory was that someone else was involved in Nicola's disappearance. But like the other theories, there was no evidence to support it. There were no signs of a struggle near the bench, the ground around it was completely undisturbed, the riverbanks showed no footprints, and nothing suggested anyone else was nearby. Despite extensive searches by the police, volunteer, and experts, the mystery remained. The river, again, it was searched thoroughly. Nothing was ever found. The area around the bench was combed, as well as the fields, over and over again, but there was nothing. Nicola's disappearance defied logic. How could a person simply vanish in such a small, well-monitored area? Despite days of intense searching, there was nothing. Divers, nothing. Advanced equipment used, nothing. No clothing, no belongings, or anything else to explain where she went. It's as if she was there one moment and she was gone the next. With no progress, Nicola's family reached out to Peter Falding, a highly respected private diving expert. Peter had solved cases involving disappearances near waters and offered his team's services to the family for free. And this was kind of the route that they wanted to go, considering if she hadn't used any of the exits, there was no activity in any of the fills that would indicate some sort of disturbance. The only real way she could have gone anywhere was by river, and she would have had to go by river and then be swimming down the river for this to even work, unless like a boat showed up, in which case there would still be a disturbance because somebody would have had to grab her unless she got onto the boat willingly. But then none of this makes any sense. But he was determined to help them find answers and bring at least some sort of closure. Peter's experience made him confident in his abilities, but this case was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. He described the situation as absolutely mind-boggling and said, normally if someone goes into a river, I'd find them within an hour. But this time, she's gone. There's nothing. If Nicola were here, I would have found her. While Peter grew doubtful that Nicola was ever in the river, the police maintained their belief that she had fallen in. A week into the search, they presented their theory to the public. We have a 10-minute window where we cannot account for Nicola's movements. After reviewing CCTV, dashcam, and doorbell footage, we have no evidence of Nicola leaving the riverside area. Our main hypothesis is that she had sadly fallen into the river. There is no evidence of a third party or criminal involvement, and this is not considered suspicious. Don't know about that. Personally, I would consider it a little suspicious about what happened. I think most people would, because the situation, it arouses suspicion, the whole thing. Now, whether it was because she wanted to leave or somebody showed up on a boat and they left, it's really kind of an unknown, does arouse suspicion. The police explained that many exits from the riverside were locked or covered by CCTV, making it unlikely that Nicola had left the area. They also analyzed dashcam footage from areas without CCTV coverage, but it showed no signs of her either. The police hypothesis faced heavy criticism, like from me. I don't think that was the case. Then again, I'm just some random YouTuber, who cares what I have to say? But many people also kind of criticized this, including Peter Falding. He believed it was unlikely that Nicola was actually still in the river. If she had fallen in, why hadn't she been found? Why was Willow, her dog, completely dry and unharmed? Journalists questioned whether Nicola might have had personal struggles that could have explained her disappearance. The police also dismissed this idea, stating it held no relevance to the case. They seemed to rule out a purposeful act and continued to focus on the river theory. The river wire, usually calm and peaceful, was no different on the morning Nicola disappeared. When someone disappears under such mysterious circumstances, suspicion often falls on those closest to the victim. This time was also no different. Many people know that in cases of foul play, the person responsible is often the person most closely related to the victim. It's just kind of how it goes. Naturally, Nicola's partner, Paul, was questioned extensively by the police. Investigators took items like his phone and computer for analysis, but the question is, if he didn't get spotted on CCTV either, could he have been waiting for her? I don't know. They examined his whereabouts and actions during the time that Nicola's disappearance, but then again, they could have checked the CCTV to see if he had showed up earlier. The whole thing doesn't make any sense. So Paul, who works as an engineer from his home, told police he had been working that morning. His alibi was supported by CCTV footage from their home, showing him leaving only after he was contacted by the school about Nicola's dog and phone being found. This evidence cleared him of suspicion, and it seems he was never seriously considered a suspect after that. One glaring oversight by the police was their failure to preserve the area around the bench where Nicola's phone and Willow were found. From the start, the police treated the case as a potential accident rather than a crime, assuming she had fallen into the river. Because of this, they didn't block access to the scene. This allowed anyone, locals, curious onlookers, and even live streamers, my God, to walk up to the bench and surrounding area. As word spread, St. Michael's was flooded with people. TikTokers, YouTubers, and amateur investigators began trespassing, knocking on locals' doors, and even began breaking into buildings at night. What should have been a quiet village was turned into chaos. The police later defended their decision not to preserve the scene, saying that too many people had already been there before they arrived. They argued that by the time they began investigating, any potential evidence had already been disturbed. Way to pass the buck, guys. But this explanation baffled many. Even if no foul play was suspected at first, the decision not to secure the area meant that critical evidence like footprints, DNA, or hair was likely lost forever. The police had made several missteps during their investigation, and the chaos in the small village of St. Michael's on Wire only grew worse. Crowds began showing up, some wanting to help, others just curious. Strangely, the police didn't really seem prepared for this. Their presence in the media faded, and instead of leading the conversation, the role of unofficial spokesperson fell to Peter Falding, the private diver assisting in the search. Peter publicly shared his doubts that Nicola was in the river, which fueled speculation, theories, and pretty much every other form of conversation, which then spread like wildfire, and people started pointing fingers at others. Things got even stranger though. Some visitors were taking selfies on the bench where Nicola's phone was found, treating the scene as a tourist attraction. Others trespassed and harassed locals, and the situation was spiraling out of control, and the police didn't appear to even be managing it. Amid the confusion, the police decided to hold another press conference. It was meant to clarify things, but it actually had the opposite effect. Previously, police had said Nicola didn't have any personal health issues that were relevant to her disappearance. Now they claimed she was a high-risk individual with unspecified vulnerabilities. When asked to explain this, the authorities refused to elaborate. This vague statement created even more speculation. People began questioning Nicola's personal life and whether Paul might be hiding something. The rumors grew louder even though Paul had been cleared by evidence, which, look, man, again, I'm not an investigator by any stretch of the imagination, but given that the police have already botched this entire thing at this point, Paul seems to be clear, but maybe investigating that a little deeper might be good, because again, the unfortunate part of the human condition is those that are closest to the victim are typically associated with them going missing. And this situation is so odd, it's something that you really need to look into to make sure you have all of your bases covered. And considering they did not have all their bases covered from the drop, it might be worth taking a second look. But in an attempt to stop the rumors, the police issued another statement. This time they revealed that Nicola had been struggling with alcohol and menopause. The announcement shocked many people, probably not the menopause part, but the alcohol part, and it felt really unnecessary and invasive, especially since such personal details are rarely made during investigations that are ongoing, and they're not usually made public like this. So while it's possible this information might have helped the search teams, it didn't need to be shared with the public. Instead of solving the problem, the police had just made it worse, turning the focus away from Nicola's disappearance and onto her private life. 2 weeks after Nicola went missing, search efforts extended to the river's estuary near the sea. The police and expert divers had combed the river repeatedly with advanced equipment, but still continued to find no sign of her. It seemed like she couldn't have been in the river. Then, 23 days after Nicola's disappearance, 2 members of the public found her body in the river Wire. It was about a mile downstream from the bench where she was last seen. This raised a troubling question. Professional divers and police had searched the area thoroughly. how could Nicola had been there all along without being discovered? Although the exact circumstances are unknown, evidence suggests she entered the water during her morning walk. Nicola was wearing a Fitbit which recorded activity that offered some clues. At 9:18 a.m., Nicola interacted with her phone for the last time. By 9:22 a.m., her Fitbit showed a dramatic spike in heart rate, a response consistent with sudden immersion in cold water. Experts explained that she had fallen into the cold water, and this triggered something called cold water shock, which is an involuntary response that includes gasping, rapid breathing, and a spike in heart rate and blood pressure. And how it works is I actually covered this in the Blue Hole episode. Oh, was it Blue Hole? I think so. Basically in Oregon, there's some really, really cold water. It's like 36 degrees. What happens is your parasympathetic nervous system and your sympathetic nervous system both get activated at the exact same time. So you go into the mammalian diving reflex, which is to hold your breath, but then also you go into a stress response, which is to start inhaling heavily. So it creates like this stuttered breathing where you will inhale water without any sort of control over your breathing, which is why people end up drowning this way. So it is possible that she may have entered the water to kind of maybe wake herself up. I mean, people do cold water plunges all the time, but unfortunately when she did, this caused her to go in and then could have also triggered a heart attack. She could have breathed in the water, but it's said that this had led to her drowning and then she was too shocked to swim or escape. And it's believed this is the official kind of end as to what's accepted as to what happened to Nicola. Senior investigator James Adderley, after thoroughly reviewing all evidence, concluded that Nicola Bulley's death was accidental. He determined that she likely fell into the cold river while on her walk and then drowned. The coroner's findings supported this conclusion, and there was no evidence of foul play or any substances in her system, which further ruled out the involvement of a third party. In the absence of any injuries, marks, or suspicious circumstances, Adderley and the coroner believed this tragic event was a result of an unfortunate accident. One interesting aspect of this case came from two villagers who reported hearing what was described as a sharp inhaling scream on that morning that Nicola disappeared. This scream was heard in the vicinity of where Nicola was last seen, but the coroner said that the scream was heard at a distance from where Nicola had entered the river. Therefore, the scream was considered an unrelated and probably coincidental event, not connected to her tragic fall. The calm, still conditions of the river also raised questions about why Nicola's body wasn't located sooner. There was no strong currents to carry her quickly away, and the area had been thoroughly searched by both professional divers and volunteers. Many wondered why it had taken so long to find her, especially since the water appeared calm. One police advisor, based on his experiences with such cases, predicted that Nicola's body would rise to the surface around 3 weeks after her disappearance. Interestingly, this prediction turned out to be accurate, and 3 weeks later, her body was indeed discovered in the river, which means she had to basically fill with gas. Like, it's an unfortunate part about what happens to all of us, but that's just the circle of life. You fill with gas and you rise to the surface, and it takes a little while for that to happen. And considering the river was cold, it would take a little longer because microorganisms would not reproduce as quickly, breaking you down. So the delay in finding her could really be attributed to a variety of factors, again, such as the water's temperature and the body's position in the river. She may have gotten stuck. There could have been like tree logs under there, a whole thing. But the timing of the discovery raised more questions about the effectiveness of the search efforts and whether the body might have been missed due to environmental conditions or an oversight. One theory suggests that Nicola fell into the river while she was trying to retrieve a tennis ball for her dog. However, her friend Emma White disputed this idea, saying Nicola had stopped bringing a tennis ball on walks months earlier because her dog Willow would pester her for it. This leaves the exact circumstances of her fall a mystery. Without clear evidence of how Nicola entered the water, we're left with an educated guess rather than definitive answers. One of the investigating officers, Peter Lawson, passed away from natural causes at the age of 50 shortly after the case was concluded. While unrelated to Nicola's disappearance, obviously, his death sparked a new wave of rumors and conspiracy theories. But what is possible as to kind of what happened? I mean, again, the problem with entering cold water in general is once it gets up to about your diaphragm, once it gets to your feet, this can trigger the mammalian diving reflex, because if it's cold enough, that's what happens. So the question is, why did she enter the river at all? This is kind of an unknown. People do weird things all the time, actually. And it could have been as simple as if she was menopausal. And this is just a hypothesis. It's possible maybe she was having a hot flash and she wanted to cool down. I have no idea. But if I all of a sudden got really, really hot, I think I'd be like, oh, well, I'm going to enter the river for a second and cool down. But then again, I probably wouldn't be wearing all of my clothes, right? So is it possible that maybe she like hiked up her pants a little bit and only wanted to like put her legs in, and for some reason that triggered a shock, which may have like caused her to accidentally fall into the river? Was there a little bit of a drop-off area inside of like the river channel that like she fell into, in which case she did go into shock? There's a whole multitude of things that it could have been. But from what it looks like there's no third party involved. It doesn't appear to me, based on what I'm reading, that there's really a conspiracy theory. It's just somebody accidentally falling in. But then also her dog didn't come to help her, which not like all dogs don't help all the time. So that's not really that crazy. And the thing about it is it can quickly happen. Once you go into shock and you inhale water, you sink. Like that's really what happens. Typically what keeps you buoyant is the air in your lungs. Once it's just filled with water, that's pretty much it for you. You're going under. So what was the dog supposed to do except sit by the bench? I think it's possible she tried to cool off and then she just accidentally fell in. But that's just my kind of theory on it. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments if you have a better theory. I'm sure you probably do. Let me know what it is, because I do go through and read these. The comments are typically unhinged for some reason on this channel. I have no idea why, but it is what it is. Thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, then please leave a like. Well, enjoy as well as you can, because somebody went missing. If you enjoyed hearing about this, not enjoyed the topic, I guess is the best way to put it, then leave a like and also subscribe. We are approaching 240,000 subs. I do appreciate y'all's support. I also want to thank my patrons real quick. At the Literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson West and Stupid Fox. Thank you guys. At the Eyewitness to the Event tier, we have Beaver Malaga and Dragon Master Knight. Thank you guys as well. At the First Hand Accounts tier, we have Pimp Daddy Shamrock and Yeeps. And at the Second Hand Accounts tier, we have Bianca, Fred Rush, and Troy. And to the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support. It goes a long way towards helping keep everything running smoothly, so it is greatly appreciated. But alright, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.